Hello, comedy fans. Gianmarco Soresi is a New York City-based stand-up comic. He's going to be here in Austin this weekend, January 6th and 7th. That's a Friday and Saturday night at Cap City Comedy Club. 2 shows each night. You can go to capcitycomedy.com to get yourself those tickets. And now, my chat with Gianmarco Soresi. Gianmarco, thank you so much for the time. How you doing today?
I'm very good. I just found out I'm coming to Austin. Just found out we're adding shows. Sales are so good, so I'm in a good mood.
Oh, that's interesting. So I have shows on January 6th and 7th, which is this Friday and Saturday. Have
Uh-huh.
there been additional shows added each night? Is there an extra day
Yes,
that's being
each
tacked on
night.
now? Okay.
Each night. There will now be 2 shows each night. So feeling good. Good New Year surprise.
I love to hear that. And this new Cap City meets a high standard that was set with the old Cap City, which unfortunately was a COVID casualty, in part because the Helium people do such a good job with their comedy clubs. I'm curious, though, Austin is becoming a real stand-up mecca in this country to go along with New York and LA, and I think Chicago to a slightly lesser degree. Have you been able to perform here in the capital city before?
Yes, last year I believe I did the Creek and the Cave.
Okay.
It's beautiful. It's a little hot for me for long term, but as a visitor, perfect. I get some. Here's the thing though. I was gonna get breakfast tacos. I'm doing the Whole 30 diet. I don't think I can eat any of that shit anymore. So I was
Uh,
so excited, and now I can't have any of it.
It's so funny that you are doing the Whole 30 diet because I literally am too, in trying to be less fat for my wife and I going on a beach vacation to Mexico here in a couple of weeks. How's your Whole 30 diet going so far?
I mean, let me tell you, we are cutting some corners right out the gate. We definitely said, okay, brown rice, that's okay. That's a big deal. My girlfriend's allowed to have 3 pieces of chocolate, 3 squares of chocolate. So we have, I would call it like a semi 30, Whole 27, something between.
What
So
what
good
is
for
the
you.
what is the dark chocolate percentage rationalization that she's going with? Like 70, 75, 85?
We determined how many pieces of chocolate to so that she doesn't cry herself to sleep, and it was 3. It was 3 right on the dot. She needs it. Listen, I'm gonna break some rules now and then. So I give her the 3 pieces of chocolate means that I get to like do a bagel every once in a while. We'll see.
So you got to perform at the Creek and the Cave, which, by the way, doing so in the dead of last summer, which is one of literally the hottest summers on record in this city, that's already kind of considered the CrossFit gym of comedy clubs here in Austin. So that had to have been
Really?
especially sweltering. Did you do the Creek and the Cave as a result of the connections that you have as a guy who is based out of New York City?
Yes, I did the Creek and the Cave sort of towards the end of New York, sort of like, visiting, where you see a skeleton of a dinosaur and you go, wow, this used to be a formidable beast. But it had delicious soup here in New York. And I did a couple shows for a couple people when I was here. So it was cool to see the space there. It's huge. I love the bear. It's just a stunning space there. But enough about the creek and the cave. I'm here to promote Cap City, which I'm very excited to see.
Yeah, well, look, I am a big believer in Cap City, but there's great comedy all over the city. That's why it's important that I think that Cap City was brought back, and it is really a beautiful space and one that I see a lot of local comedians doing a great job of honing their craft too. Is your home comedy club, since it is New York, is it the Comedy Cellar right now? Is that where you really cut your teeth?
Yeah, I mean, that's not where I cut my teeth. I cut my teeth to get in there. I cut my teeth at a club called LOL Comedy Club, which is known as one of the worst comedy clubs in the world. And I still perform there sometimes. But sometimes I like to talk shit about it in public because I'm hoping that's how I want to get out, you know? But even then, they'll still take me. So LOL, that's where I cut my teeth. A rough and tumble comedy club where most of the people there, they don't even know they're at a comedy show. They thought they were going to see The Lion King. It's the kind of person who thought they could get day of tickets to The Lion King, and they go, "Oh no!" And then someone says, Bill Burr's going to be at this club, and they go, "I recognize that." And then they go, and then they see me, and are deeply disappointed. And then they get the bill, and it's $1,000 for 2 bottles of water. So that's the club I cut my teeth at. But now, yes, the Cellar is my home for as much as they'll let me be there, and I'm very grateful for that.
That's got to be pretty badass getting to walk into that place most nights, considering that it really is the spot. I know there's an argument to be made about the Comedy Store too, but the level of talent going through that place on a night in night out basis is just bewildering.
Yeah, it's really exhausting to be frank. I want to be able to bomb on a show every once in a while. You go to the Cellar, you go, oh shit, I'm following a Z's. I gotta bring it. I can't work out that new Whole 30 material I've been doing.
And learning a little bit more about you on the Type 5 podcast, really good podcast talking to comedians, I learned that you are a big fan of feedback. You are always striving to get better. And I'd say that the end result is great proof that you're doing a pretty good job of that. And listening to comedians talk about how they get better at the art form, a lot do go back and watch and listen to themselves and take notes and figure out what worked and what did not. Is that kind of how you go about things too when you're trying to craft a joke?
After every set, I listen back to it, and while I'm listening, I write down other professions I should pursue. And let me tell you, I am a listener backer. It's sometimes it's a lot. I'm going to this weekend now. It'll be 4 headlining shows. That's like 4.5 hours of stand-up comedy to listen to. If I ever have a stalker and they knew how much I listen to myself, they'd be like, "Whoa, that's a little creepy, dude." So I am a big fan of listening back. Comics should listen. Some comics can do it without. Not me. Everyone has their own thing. So I know some comics, they've never written down a word in their life. I don't even know if they can spell or read or write, but they're amazing. For me, I'm a nerdy guy. I started in theater, so I was very used to like reading a script, memorizing the script. So I write down, I listen, I adjust. I work on the same joke for 8 years. And sometimes it comes together, and sometimes I've just wasted a ginormous sum of my youth.
I'm not sure how many people think that most stand-ups are up there just riffing, going off the cuff. And there are certain guys that can definitely do that. But most people have a really good idea of what it is that they're going to say when they're out there. I mean, George Carlin was somebody who was rehearsed to the word. And it's part of the reason why he was so brilliant. And there is that performance art element for you as well. But you're such a good storyteller. And you've got this darkness about you that it just works really well. It's interesting, though, that as you just mentioned, you have more of that theater background. You didn't really crave being a stand-up comic when you were a kid or early on in your college days, and you moved to New York City to pursue acting, take a class at Caroline's just to be able to say that you are a comedian as well, be able to put that on that proverbial card. Was there a lesson that you learned about being funny at Caroline's, though, that still sticks with you to this day?
Well, the class was taught by a woman named Linda Smith,
Okay.
who's was apparently kind of legendary in the 80s and 90s, I've been told. And God, I so much of those classes, people have different feelings about those classes, but it's just a deadline, really. It's a deadline that you have to get on stage and actually do the thing that you profess you want to do. And I think I just learned, I watched it recently because I did it at Caroline's, which you might know, Caroline's just closed.
Oh, I didn't.
And yeah, Caroline's just closed at the end of this past year. It was a loss. And I got to do one set there last month, and I
You say
did
that,
one of
you say that like a relative who has been suffering from dementia for the last 5 years.
5 is generous. It's a beautiful club. I had my first headlining show there, but I had my first set there, and I ended up doing like a joke from that set for my last set there. I thought it would be fun, and didn't go great. Was not a great bit. Turns out that my first bits were actually not very good at all, and I think I just learned from Linda, who taught me there, the beginning machinations of what makes a joke, and just learning the ability to listen. There's just comedians who never get better, and it's like it feels like their ears must be broken. That is your ruler. To not be able to take it off the audience. It doesn't mean you have to crush every single time. You can't have bits that are darker. But if you can't incorporate the audience's response and use that as a ruler to see where your material is going and how well you're articulating the funny idea, you're fucked. And listen, this is no, if you're a deaf comedian, all the more power to you. But you got to figure out something else. You got to be looking at the faces. You got to be doing something. And if you're blind and you're deaf, it's going to be a tough profession. I'm sure there's ways you can feel the faces. So I don't want to be ableist. What I'm saying is, if you can't hear, that is the best ruler you have. And I learned that beginning of that process with Linda Smith at Caroline's Comedy Club.
I've got the solution for deaf comedians. And of course, I'm in Texas, so everything harkens back to high school football here. You need to hire somebody who's like a hype man, but you have to call him the light switch man, because what he's doing is he's reading the room. And in the back of the room, there's a single light that's not distracting anybody. Anytime you get the crowd going, or as much as you get the crowd going, that's how much the light switch is flickering off and on.
Oh, wow. I like that.
The reason why that's connected to Texas high school football is there's a team for the School of the Deaf, and they've actually been pretty good in the last few years. And they do certain things where there's normally a horn with a light on either scoreboard. So there you go.
Awesome.
You are somebody who delves into the darkness, as we've been talking about, and you admitted on the Tight Five that that does involve at least a little bit of bombing. I guess in trying to figure out how dark you've gone before. Have you ever tried the 9/11 joke? And if so, is it something that you were able to stick with, because that's already such a touchy topic, especially in New York?
Do you know which 9/11 joke? The 9/11 joke I do that works. I don't do that often because it's a pretty oddball one. It's not going to be funny given that we know the topic right now. But it was my girlfriend and I went to one of those interactive museums where it's not really a museum. You take a bunch of Instagram pictures posing with all the exhibits. It's called the 9/11 Memorial. So that usually works. What are the other nine? I have another. Yeah, I have a couple 9/11 jokes, and I think the one I mentioned on that podcast I haven't figured out yet. It was about there is a real person rebuilding the Titanic, and it's going to go along the same route. And it was just the idea that means, in theory, someday people will be selling plane rides through where the towers used to be. And it felt very logical to me and funny. It never worked when I did it. It was a long time ago. I could try it again. But I think the thing, and I think this is the mistake, comics who like dark humor can make, is you can go as dark as you want. But the darker it is, the human beings, when you say 9/11 to someone, it automatically elicits, real normal human beings, not fucking crazy psychotic comedians. When you say 9/11, it elicits the sadness in them. And in that sadness, you can really tickle them because there's a vulnerability that's exposed. But your joke has to beat that sadness. The funny has to beat the feeling of sadness. That's how funny it needs to be. So a lot of times you might have a funny thought, and it might be a decent joke, it might even do well online, but it just, in the moment with an audience, the sadness beats it. And that's when you get the, oh. Now, I saw Jeff Sheen, who's a fantastic comedian in New York. He did my show this past Sunday at Sesh Comedy Club. It's called The Silver Lining. And he had a joke about his grandmother dying. And I have a lot of grandma dying jokes, none of which I'm fully happy with yet. And he had a joke about his grandma dying after a fall. And he says this on his album, so I think it's okay to say. He says, she was murdered by the ground. And then talks about his grandma's last words, like, boop, 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 boop. And it killed so hard. And I remember just watching, I was like, that's amazing, because what he's saying is really sad. He's talking about his grandma who fell and died from a physical injury. And yet the humor and the turns of phrase just soared past it. The audience is laughing, and then they're laughing on top of the fact that they can't believe they're laughing at this thing, and it's beautiful. And it really made me go it really made me go, my grandma jokes, my grandparent jokes dead grandparent jokes are not quite there yet because it was just so beautiful. So yeah, but I'm sure when he was working it out, maybe he became fully formed. I'm sure one day he says he made, my grandmother died from a fall. It's like the floor killed her, and the audience was like, "Oh my God, what the fuck, dude?" Uh, but you'd have to ask him. But it was a great bit, and that's why I love dark humor, because not only are you laughing at the joke, you cannot believe that you're laughing at the thing that you're laughing at.
Yeah, it's something that typically horrifies a certain faction of society, but a lot of those people are also scared of their own shadow too. So in the profession that you're in, where you're able to get away with it, and sometimes there's a larger point, and sometimes that point is just to make people laugh. I think that especially if you are in a way mocking your own grief, that that adds an acceptability to it too. So I hope you bring back that other 9/11 joke. I think there is a path there.
I'll keep working on it.
Listening to comedians talk about really receiving sorts of validation to keep with it, to keep trying your hand at it. A lot of people have that moment where they hear from somebody whose work they admire, who really helps to encourage them to keep plowing forward. Do you have somebody like that in your comedy career? Another fellow comedian, somebody you find really funny who gave you those encouraging words?
Oh, encouraging words. They happen gradually. I really can think about when I was like coming up the first time Matthew Broussard at a show, and I barely knew him, was like, "I like it what you're doing on Twitter," and it's like, that was really exciting in that moment. Now I couldn't give a shit what Matthew tells me. Fuck Matthew. But in the moment, I was a young comic, and I had known him from Conan and stuff, and I was like, "Wow, this really means a lot." So it's gradual, and it's tough. I have to remind myself as a comedian. I think when I see a really great comic, I know I'm not the only comic that feels this way. You see a great comic, feelings of self-loathing and just envy about how good they are. They happen. You see someone kill, and I really am working to like tell the person how funny I think they are, or how funny a bit was, and because I know how much it means to me coming up. Yeah, it's just along the way you get all sorts of people, and I have lots of people that I work with at the Cellar who I think are fantastic comedians. Jeffrey Asmus, I always say, Caitlin Palufo, Renan Hirschberg, Jay Jordan is a good friend of mine. And it's whenever a comic tells you, "Oh, that bit, that was good," that feels really, really special. And it lets you know, you go on the road, you can lose a sense of like what smart comedy is, because from the road that hacky comedy can work. And it just feels nice when you have a comedian that you respect their work. If they say something about a specific joke, it makes you feel a little bit more grounded. It makes you feel like, okay, I'm still on the path, to being a good comedian.
That's cool to hear. And last question, you are the host of the Downside podcast, which are conversations with, I think it's mostly, if not all, your fellow comedians, where it's rooted in something that you consider to be the downside of life in a moment, or your guest does anyhow. And that is based on you kind of being a lifelong cynic. I am also a lifelong cynic. So what's something that you're cynical about right now that you are trying to turn into a bit on stage, but aren't quite there just yet?
Ooh, boy. I gotta figure out one that isn't so offensive that out of context at all. Oh, I know exactly what it is. So I'm doing a chunk right now about a gun show I went to in Florida.
Okay.
And it's just kind of like, I like to think of it like it's a bit where I really try to show how both sides of the gun debate have some very emotionally valid points. And I think that's kind of my goal. Is I really want you to feel like if we have different beliefs, I want you to feel like I'm on your side for a moment, and then maybe not, and vice versa. And in a bit where I can do it in a liberal place like New York, and then a more conservative city, and the joke that offends here is going to be applauded there, and vice versa. I want everyone to walk away a little bit like, "Fuck this guy." Uh, And the joke I'm really working on, ultimately, it's an idea about how Hollywood is hypocritical about guns because it's all these liberals who claim to be anti-guns, but they make most of their money making movies where guns are like the main character. And it's the idea that that if they really were anti-guns, they'd make more karate movies. And ultimately, the punchline that is not working is Hollywood's done stuff like this with other things. Like everyone in movies used to smoke cigarettes, and then there was a big backlash against tobacco, and now pretty much no one smokes cigarettes. Everyone vapes, and I feel like karate is the vaping of violence because it'll kill you, but it takes so long, and then that's good because we all know it takes a lot of time for the cops to go in the building, and there's something about it. It's like I don't know, it was inspired obviously about the horrific tragedy in Texas, where the cops waited like an insanely long amount of time before they went in the building, and it's like there's part of it. I don't know if it's been too long since that thing. Part of it is like again back to my original point: shootings are extremely tragic, and if you're going to make a joke about that, it really has to the point you're making and the punchline have to overcome one of the biggest tragedies in the world. And if it doesn't, it's going to get and I don't want that.
He is Gianmarco Soresi. You can catch him this weekend at Cap City Comedy Club. It is Friday and Saturday night, 2 shows each night, extra shows just added, which means there's going to be some really good reserved tickets near the front of the stage. Beautiful club, by the way, so well set up, perfect sound. As much as I love the old Cap City, I'm not going to lie, the new club, it blows it away just in terms of the aesthetic. And then also the caliber of comedian that they're bringing in as well. Go to capcitycomedy.com to grab yourself those tickets. And Gianmarco, where can people find you online?
You find me online. It's my name at Gianmarco Soresi on all platforms. And listen to my podcast, The Downside.
Thank you so much, Gianmarco. Safe travels here and back this weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks to Gentleman Jesus for the intro and outro music. Hear more of his work at gentlemanjesus.com. And thanks to you for tuning in. For more of the show and to connect on social media, visit booksonpod.com. Talk to you next time on Books on Pod.